everyone. Great to see all of you here. It's budget time. The leaders seem real excited about that. It's our annual ritual, but it's a chance for us to bond very closely together. But first, I want to thank my extraordinary senior team. You know them well, and if you don't, there are some new faces that I'm going to introduce you to. But the Secretary to the Governor, Karen Persichelli-Keough, what an incredible leader of our team, but also our state government. I so appreciate you. Our Budget Director, Blake Washington, this is your big day, so we'll be hearing from you very shortly, but thank you for all you do. Counsel Brian Mahana, who's been earning more than his keep, filing more lawsuits than I think were possible in the last, let's see, my guess, 365 days from today. So thank you, Brian, for leading a great team, but also two new members. Our Director of State Operations, Jackie Bray. We used to call her Commissioner Bray. We know her from her time as the Commissioner of Division of Homeland Security, and my new Policy Director, Emma Vadera, who is doing an amazing job jumping in and coming up with countless ingenious, very thoughtful policy proposals. I want to thank them. Let's give another round of applause to this team. And our leaders in state government, Leader of the Senate, Andre Stewart-Cousins. We're going to be in this room a lot. I so appreciate the relationship we've developed over the last 5 years, and admire your great leadership and trailblazing woman in your own right, so thank you. And Carl Heastie, the Speaker of the Assembly, again, someone who just understands the levers of power in a way that I benefit from, and I thank him for his leadership of his sometimes diverse opinions in that assembly, so thank you. Also, we have other leaders that I'm recognizing. I want to thank, I don't see them on my list here, but let's see, I don't want to miss anybody. This is really important to me. I'm not forgetting our controller, that's for sure, Tom DiNapoli. Thank you, thank you. Also, other leaders in the legislature, I want to give a shout out to our Senate Deputy Majority Leader, Mike Gianaris. Senate Finance Chair, Liz Kruger. Assembly Ways and Means Chair, Gary Pretlow. Senate Minority Leader, Robert Ort. Senate Minority Leader, Assembly, didn't get you the permission there, Will, or the promotion, Assembly Minority Leader, Will Barkley. Senate Finance Ranker, Senator O'Mara, and Assembly Ways and Means Ranker, Assemblyman Rao. As I mentioned, we'll be spending many, many hours in this room over the next few months. And for what purpose? The common effort of fighting for New Yorkers. And I've already acknowledged a number of our guests that are coming before me now, but if there's anybody I've missed, I want to thank you for everything you do for us as well. As you heard, last week we laid out a very ambitious agenda for 2026. Our vision was for a stronger, safer, more affordable New York. And today, I'm here to show you exactly how we'll do that responsibly in our fiscal year 2027 executive budget. A budget is much more than figures on a page. It's a statement of priorities, a test of discipline. And this year, with so much uncertainty coming out of Washington, it also must be a plan that can hold up to pressure. Over the last 4 years, we've proven something important, that you can make historic investments without raising income taxes, without mortgaging the next generation, without losing sight of what people can afford. Taxpayer money is earned with New Yorkers' sweat, long days, late nights, early mornings. So I feel particularly obligated to be a responsible steward while also investing in how we build a better future. For years, the biggest threat to our budget has always been a potential recession. We've been talking about that since the pandemic. And we planned carefully to protect New Yorkers from that possible risk. But I will say this, the newest, most unpredictable challenge is something very different. Direct attacks on states by the Trump administration. Now, the federal government's relationship with states has never been simple, but for decades it was always this basic trust. When states stepped up to deliver federal programs, the federal government was a reliable partner, making sure the funds were there. In just 1 year, the Trump administration has shattered that trust, and we're bearing the brunt of it. Time and time again also, and I'm disappointed in members of Congress, congressional Republicans who are in power right now, including 7 from our state, who are not right now at this moment standing up to fight for those who elected them. They have the power to stop the bleeding, but they're not fighting for their constituents. And all across this country, red states, blue states, real Americans are feeling the consequences, working families, no matter who they voted for. And that's why this budget reflects two realities at the same time. We do have real momentum here in New York. You can feel it. It's real. But we have volatility on the road ahead because of this uncertainty out of Washington. And that's why we have to be so vigilant. That vigilance matters because New York's recovery after the pandemic was not automatic. It was built on careful choices, an equitable tax system, and an economic climate that encourages growth. It's that balance that has helped restore the confidence, how we created 1 million private sector jobs since I've been governor, and put our state on stronger footing. But that success is not guaranteed. That's why this budget is built to protect what's working while preparing for the uncertainty ahead. So let me start with the big picture. This executive budget totals $260 billion in all fund spending, an increase of 0.7%. Spending is up very slightly, primarily to offset federal cuts, especially to health care. And that's because federal funds in this budget are down roughly $10.3 billion. That's an 11.4% decrease just from last year. Now, some of that was pandemic relief. We knew it'd run out. We planned for it. But $3 billion of it is a loss of recurring Medicaid funding, money that we had been depending on to provide care for millions of New Yorkers. Now, the scope of these federal cuts would be far worse if we had not stood up to the Trump administration, successfully blocking at least $4 billion in additional cuts and freezes in court and through the bully pulpit, meaning my phone calls. That includes attempted cuts to law enforcement grants, safety net programs, infrastructure projects that all deliver good union jobs. To help offset these federal cuts, state operating funds will have to increase to $157.6 billion. And we're ensuring that vulnerable New Yorkers don't lose essential care. And we're doing it while still protecting taxpayers. Once again, there are no income taxes on New Yorkers, and this budget maintains reserves at $14.6 billion. Let me take a moment to put that number in context. When I came into office in 2021, we had about $2.5 billion in reserves. Over the last few years, we've built our reserves to the gold standard of responsible budgeting, strong enough to protect New York in a downturn, and flexible enough to react when families and businesses needed help. Last year, working with our leaders, we made a deliberate decision to use a portion of those reserves to pay down $7 billion in unemployment insurance debt. In so doing, we lifted a major burden off of every small business while increasing benefits for workers who happen to be laid off from their jobs. In other words, we built those rainy day funds for a reason. When it started raining, we used them. But even with that drawdown, which we will be restoring, our reserves are still healthy. Don't worry about that. We still have the highest reserves of any administration, percentages and actual, in state history. And this budget continues to protect New York's fiscal stability. Here's the good news. Revenues have continued to exceed projections, driven in part by record Wall Street bonuses. That reflects a basic reality of New York's tax system. We already have the most progressive tax structure in the entire country, which means this: when the economy is strong, and particularly when high net worth individuals and employers earn more, our revenues rise. And that's why we're able to invest more without asking New Yorkers to pay more. So let me be clear about something else. This is not an austerity budget, but it is a disciplined one. And we're continuing to invest in core services that New Yorkers rely on while keeping the growth of state operating funds at a responsible level. Over the last year, we took a hard look at programs that had grown out of control, not to take services away, but to make sure that taxpayer dollars are actually being spent, properly reaching the people they're meant to serve. One example is CDPAP. It's a program that provides critical care for many vulnerable New Yorkers. But it was created with absolutely no oversight. Its growth was exponential, driven by lax rules and, in some cases, even fraud. Expenses went out of control and jeopardized the very viability of this vital program. We said enough is enough. We cut out the abuse and brought the program back in line. And our reforms are working. The people who need it are getting it. We put the program on the path to long-term fiscal stability, and by controlling our overhead costs, we have found nearly $1.2 billion in savings, twice what we expected on an annual basis. Now, what do we do with those savings? We use them to stabilize Medicaid at the moment when the federal government was pulling billions in support. Let me explain what that means. Medicaid is one of the largest drivers of state spending. You know that. Nearly half of New Yorkers rely on publicly supported health coverage. Children, seniors, people with disabilities, working families. But this year, Donald Trump declared war on states and slashed federal support that had been in place since the 1960s. We saw the impact of that decision almost immediately. Over the summer, we were forced to make tough decisions to protect care and keep our system stable. Yes, the state did step up, absorbing $750 million in costs from the federal government that they had walked away from. And then the president's big ugly bill is going to blow a $3 billion hole in Medicaid in this budget alone. Clearly, we could not have planned for this. Certainly not when Donald Trump took an oath of office exactly 1 year ago today. But here's how we'll deal with it. We'll continue to find ways to improve efficiency across our healthcare system because bending the cost curve matters the most. But we will not shift costs onto families or leave vulnerable communities without a lifeline the way Washington has. That's not who we are. This budget takes a balanced approach, protecting services, supporting providers, and managing growth responsibly. As federal policy shifts, we'll continue to protect New Yorkers while being honest about what the state can and cannot absorb. Even as we manage these challenges, we're still investing in working families to help them get ahead. And that starts with putting more money back in their pockets. This year, New Yorkers are paying the lowest middle-class tax rate in nearly 7 years, starting this year. And we're ending state income taxes on tips so service workers can keep more of what they earn. If you're working long shifts, nights, weekends, those tips could actually help you pay those bills and should not be taxed away. We're extending relief to our farmers. This budget includes $30 million we didn't anticipate would be needed for targeted relief from New York farmers who are impacted by the Trump tariffs, especially dairy farmers and specialty crops. This will provide about $3,000 on average to help offset the costs that are rising just this year because of those tariffs to help them get ahead. Now let's shift to one of the biggest pressure we know is on families. Child care. When I took office, the state of New York was spending about $832 million a year in child care subsidies, nowhere near enough to meet the needs of working families. As New York's first mom governor, this is personal to me. Someone's adding up how many times I say that. It might be 475, but who knows. But since I lived through this I know what it means. Since taking office, through sustained and deliberate investment, New York has spent more than $8 billion on child care and early education. And this year alone, we'll invest $4.5 billion in child care to expand access, reduce costs for working families. We know that New York City and the rest of the state have different needs and different infrastructure when it comes to child care, and they require different solutions at this time. For New York City, we'll invest $500 million to fully fund the first 2 years of Universal Two-Care program, while continuing to support them with the promise of Universal 3K. Statewide, we're investing $1.3 billion in a different but equally ambitious approach. First, we'll make Universal Pre-K available to every single 4-year-old by 2028. Now don't worry, we've been building for this for years. Roughly 75% of the 4-year-olds we expect to serve are already enrolled in pre-K. But to meet families' needs before that age, we'll pilot community-wide child care to provide year-round, full-day child care from newborns up to 3-year-olds. And we'll build on our proven success with our child care assistance program and our voucher program, so tens of thousands of more families can access high-quality care for no more than $15 per week. Now, I want to be clear. I can fund this expansion in the near term because the revenue is there. We're not pretending to be able to predict enrollment utilization or federal policies 5 years from now. So we're doing what a responsible government does, using existing resources today and building toward long-term sustainability. But know this, my commitment into the future is there. And our commitment to kids doesn't end when they age out of child care. This budget invests in the next generation with nearly $40 billion in school aid. And we're continuing to ensure that high-need districts are funded appropriately. After 16 long years of previous administrations coming up short, I made the decision to fully fund foundation aid, giving schools certainty without significantly driving up local taxes. Many of these districts are in high need or rural areas of our state and don't have other ways to raise revenue. That's why we're once again increasing foundation aid on top of the amount schools receive under the existing formula. Now, I want to be clear about something. Funding alone does not guarantee outcomes. That's why we've paired historic investments with common sense reforms and changes. Something as simple as getting cell phones out of classrooms so kids start paying attention to teachers and learning again. You can applaud that. That's one of the best things we've ever done. John King. We're also returned to back to basics learning, how we teach our kids how to read. And this year we'll expand that approach to math next year. I want better outcomes. Remember our Universal School Meals program that we launched last year? It was so popular that demand exceeded our expectations, and I'm really proud of this, working with the legislature. So we're expanding access with a $395 million investment for year 2. That's $50 million more than we did last year, because we know the demand is there, because no child should ever have to worry about where their next meal is coming from, full stop. We're also protecting affordability at SUNY and CUNY. And I saw the power of a college education to the incredible opportunities it unlocked for my own family. And that's why I want that available for anyone. And that's another reason why this budget continues a tuition freeze and provides campuses with an additional $90 million in operating support so they don't have to raise costs on students and families. And we're so proud of our free community college program. It's already helping adult learners get new skills for good-paying jobs. But to build on that success, we're increasing our funding from $47 million to nearly $60 million so we can expand to new high-demand fields. Also updating our eligibility requirements so New Yorkers who already have a degree in another field can retrain as nurses and help our workforce meet their demands faster. New Yorkers deserve a high-quality education just as they deserve a safe and affordable place to call home. While we've made real progress, my commitment to tackling New York's housing crisis is as strong as ever. We're now in year 5 of our $25 billion housing plan. And I'm happy to report we're in the home stretch. And we'll meet our goal of 100,000 homes new or preserved when we conclude this next year. But I want to build on that success now and not wait till next year. That's why our 5-year plan, before it concludes, I want to invest $250 million for affordable housing to keep projects moving and further expand supply. And we'll provide $100 million for Move in New York, helping families move into high-quality, factory-built starter homes, built quickly at about half the cost of traditional housing. We're also investing $50 million in our Resilient and Ready program to protect housing from extreme weather and flooding, as we see so often in our rural areas. An additional $25 million for our homeless housing and assistance program, bringing our total investment to $153 million so we can keep supporting our most vulnerable neighbors. So far, you've heard me talk about affordability, education, health care, housing, but the foundation of it all is keeping people safe. We've made record investments in crime-fighting strategies that work, over $3 billion, and the results are real. And this budget builds on what's working. $352 million for gun violence prevention. Just spoke to a mayor this morning who thanked me so much because crime is down in their city when it had been going up exponentially. $77 million to strengthen subway safety. We're also investing $35 million in securing communities grants to protect houses of worship and vulnerable organizations. And the final policy I want to address is something that's very important to me: forging a cleaner, greener future for our children and grandchildren. Knowing the threats that our environment faces, during my very first month in office, I added $1.3 billion to the Environmental Bond Act, bringing the total to $4.3 billion, and the voters of New York approved. And that investment is already delivering, protecting drinking water, upgrading our aging infrastructure, and creating clean energy jobs across the state. This year, I've decided to go much bigger, extending our commitment with a new $3.75 billion 5-year investment in clean water infrastructure. It protects public health and supports the building of housing that New Yorkers so desperately need. Let's take a closer look at how these priorities are reflected in the numbers. And to walk us through the plan, I'd like to invite our Budget Director, Blake Washington, to the podium. Blake?
Well, thank you, Governor, for giving this wonderful privilege to serve the people of the state of New York, to work alongside these wonderful professionals down in the Division of Budget. We have 300 wonderful, dedicated people that give their life to this, working alongside the senior staff, the most brilliant team you have in the state government, but also to our leaders in the legislature and to the controller himself. We work with your teams throughout the year, and this doesn't happen without a level of collaboration and honest discussions and frankness. You have wonderful and brilliant staff as well, so it's a real privilege to be part of it. So thank you. So we'll get down to business with the executive budget overview. As the governor mentioned, all fund spending total in the budget stands at $260 billion, a 0.7% increase. All funds spending in the budget includes state operating funds, federal funds, and capital funding. And also previously mentioned by the governor, state operating funds are up 5.7% to a total of $157.6 billion year over year. The governor's put forward an executive budget that prioritizes making New York State safer and more affordable for individuals and families, and does so without relying on taxes increases, gimmicks, and instead relies on existing revenue streams that are strong to fund new initiatives. As the governor first talked about in the State of State last year, this budget builds off the governor's record of investments in child care, and it brings us one step closer to achieving universality in every corner of the state. And along those lines, the governor continues to be a strong champion for public and non-public schools, providing the highest amount of funding for both in New York State's history, respectively. We have several initiatives in this year's budget that are designed to enhance the governor's affordability agenda. It's not just the governor's agenda, it's also the agenda of the legislature of reaching affordability for every person in every part of the state. So this budget makes significant investments to do just that in our housing stock, by funding infrastructure projects and bringing more good-paying jobs right home to New York State. And in the last year alone, the state of New York, under Governor Hochul's leadership, we've added $100 billion in capital projects for infrastructure jobs throughout the state, for infrastructure projects, rather, throughout the state. So to do all this, because it's a lot, the state's fiscal health must be in good shape. So let's just take a few seconds to review where we are. The U.S. economy had a very complex 2025. There were multiple pressures on the economy, particularly when we were enacting budget last year. We saw that there was frequently shifting trade policy that exists to today. Inflation was accelerating. It still is on the uptick. And certainly we witnessed during the year a prolonged federal shutdown. Those are the pressures that really bore down on some of our decision making when we were enacting the budget, and we reflected revenues accordingly. But since then, we've seen a surge in high-tech investment. We've seen the stock market rally. We've seen consumer spending through the wealth effect. We've seen people in the state of New York spend more. And that's done more to produce revenues for the state of New York. So these same factors impacted our revenue projections. And again, going back to last year, when we enacted the budget, we might recall, Governor, it was right in the middle of Liberation Day, where tariffs were imposed throughout most of the world, and the U.S. economy had its first contraction in 3 years. We watched the stock market volume decrease by about 20% amid budget enactment. Economists were warning of slow growth, and inflation was expected to remain elevated. The markets reacted based on whatever was shared on social media by the White House. So things were really heady at the time. And to add on top of that, we had a major reconciliation bill that was being negotiated by Congress, and some of those actions would have impacted and continue to impact state tax receipts. With those factors in mind, we drafted the state budget in '26, and we reduced our revenue estimates by $4 billion on an annual basis, just looking at the facts on the ground. But, since then, Wall Street defied the odds and exceeded everyone's expectations. Every economist that we work with, and we work with economists throughout the nation, and in our mid-year report, we brought up revenues significantly to recapture all that was lost in our downward revision upon budget enactment. So we revised revenues upwards in the mid-year update, and then moving forward into the upcoming fiscal year, we revised revenues again. So not only did we return to base in the mid-year, but we're exceeding the base by an additional $3.8 billion in the current fiscal year 26, the one ending in March, and then an additional $5.7 billion projected for the upcoming fiscal year. And this is all due to the strength of Wall Street, coupled with the state's already progressive tax code. And these revisions have increased, again, as I said before, over the executive budget projections. So all that being said, coming from enacted budget to mid-year to today, we have revised estimates up by a cumulative $11 billion. And this gives the state of New York a good amount of cash on hand, not only to pull down the budget gaps, which you'll see in our report that comes out later today, but also to pledge significant resources to the things that New Yorkers care about and the things that the governor has talked about just last week in the State of the State. We're doing this without raising taxes or without taking on costly debt. So forecasting, one of the things we always like to do in budgeting, and I'm sure the controller can relate, we try to provide some risks to everything that we talk about here. So obviously we have a U.S. economy that still faces headwinds in 2026. We still have pressure from tariffs. We have trade policy writ large that weighs heavily. We have the markets, the equity markets in general are inherently volatile. We watch those like a hawk, and we tailor our expectations accordingly. We expect GDP growth to moderate throughout the year. The labor market in the state of New York, much across the nation, is in a no hire, no fire phase, where there's sort of an armistice between employers and employees, which is a good thing, but that people are not losing employment, but we always like to see upward pressure on employment. Unemployment will continue to be elevated in the state of New York, projected to peak in the late spring, but the unemployment is certainly has been modified considerably post-pandemic. Inflation should continue to rise above the federal target, which we know is 2%. And in return, we think that we're projecting, the division budget is projecting that the feds won't make another decision on interest rates until later this summer. And if they do, that would spur, of course, consumer spending, and it would also lower borrowing costs for consumers in the state of New York. So as the governor previously mentioned, state reserves, our primary reserves rest at $14.6 billion. And of that, we're on track by the end of fiscal year 2028 to have $10 billion of that 14.6 in the rainy day fund. And the rainy day fund is a statutory fund which includes conditions for withdrawal and repayment. So it locks the funding up to ensure that they're secure for emergencies that are unforeseen. We project a $2.4 billion current law surplus in the current year, which we're using to pay down future debt and to support child care investments that the governor outlined just last week. We continue to show credit rating agencies that New York State is on a sound fiscal footing. Our debt outstanding has grown at a modest rate over the past decade. And it's below the rate of inflation, something we're very proud of. That's how we're able to offer $100 billion in capital appropriations over the last 4 years. The state's out-year budget gaps remain manageable. In our position, we look at these and we know that through scrutiny on expenditures and by always looking at how we're spending money in the state of New York, we can meet the challenge of 2028. But as these gaps, as you see before us today, 2030 is the first time you're seeing the 2030 gap under our financial plan construct. But the way, if you were to look at our mid-year report, the difference between these gaps in their mid-year report is primarily related to higher than expected revenues and finding efficiencies within state agencies. The governor tasked the Division of Budget in all our agencies post enactment of H.R. 1 to really take a close look about what we're spending resources on. Before we ask New Yorkers for another dime, are we using all of the taxpayer dollars that we have to the greatest possible effect in the most responsible manner? The agencies have responded in kind. We saved roughly $400 million in the current year on that action alone, which we're carrying into the future. Due to our revenue revisions, out-year gaps have been lowered by $4 billion annually, and we're taking some of that current law surplus and paying off some of the 2030 gap that you see before you today. So Governor Hochul, as we talked about before, as you mentioned before, prioritized reserves upon taking office. Here's the trajectory of where we were and where we are. And you, as the governor alluded to earlier, the difference between 25 and 26 data is a deposit to the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. So when the governor took office, again, levels were fairly pedestrian, very underfunded, but since that time, the governor has invested heavily to make sure that we put the state on firm financial footing. I mentioned earlier how we're going to pledge more and more, an increasing level to the rainy day fund. Looking at moving to the next slide, just looking at some of the major cost drivers that the governor articulated earlier, Medicaid and school aid comprise the majority of spending growth in the budget, well over 60%. On the slide behind me, the 11.4% Medicaid is related to bringing on new spending related to the MCO tax that we authorized in last year's budget. It also relates to investing in nursing homes and in hospitals at a rate that a new investment in nursing homes and hospitals to combat some of the federal volatility, some of the uncompensated care that we're going to start to see over the next year. It also relates to increased costs for prescription drugs and enrollment and demographic changes, enrollment in managed long-term care. School aid continues to increase as the governor continues to fully fund foundation aid for the first time in history over the last handful of years. We've accomplished that. The governor holds the line. The three primary drivers in state operations spending, which going up 5.7%, relates to our investments in child care, school aid, and Medicaid. That doesn't mean state operations of operating agencies. That means of overall spending, non-federal spending. We're up 5.7%. As the governor mentioned earlier, the federal receipts will decrease by approximately 11.4% primarily related to H.R. 1, the Essential Plan actions, some revisions to the Essential Plan, but it's also related to the expiration of pandemic-era aid and some FEMA aid as well, things that we, things that we were aware of, we plan for in the state financial plan. On this item on spending growth, one thing on Medicaid that you see is, as the governor articulated earlier, is we're able to shore up some of these, we're able to provide this increase in Medicaid because we used savings from the CDPAP program to reinvest into the program for the people that need it most. So, you know, the Medicaid program has a lot of need. We have a growing and aging population of seniors, and we'll continue to look for efficiencies in the program. So the executive budget also proposes several tax actions. It does not increase taxes, but it does have some actions we want you to be aware of. First, we decouple state business taxes from certain H.R. 1 provisions that relate to federal tax expensing that would preserve $1.6 billion in state revenue. We simplify and we enhance the child independent tax credit, care credit rather, to provide greater relief to families on the lower end of the income scale. Some of these families will have an increased benefit of nearly $500 on an annual basis. And then we extend, but we do not raise the corporate rate surcharge that was enacted immediately post-pandemic for an additional 3 years through 2029. As the governor mentioned before, child care remains the long pole in the tent, and this is this is one of our largest investments. It is the largest investment in child care in state history, as the governor's taken that away previous to me. Over $8 billion invested in child care under your tenure, Governor, thus far. And in this year, we're going to provide a total of $4.3 billion in statewide investment in child care and early childhood education. Of that total, $1.7 billion has been widely reported. Those are 100% new investments. So we believe that with $3.2 billion in child care vouchers that are now available statewide, that we think that'll go a long way to alleviate wait lists. It won't eliminate every wait list, but we're getting families on a path to have some level of planning and excitement around the program. We're also excited to say that among all the programs, the strategies we're deploying in childcare is that we're partnering with Dutchess, Monroe, and Broome counties to provide for contracted care in those upstate jurisdictions. It lowers the cost and it provides a novel way of providing care for young people. And we're, of course, happy to help the city of New York launch its 2Care program, which will be phased in over several years. In addition to the investments to expand pre-K services on a statewide basis, the governor has enough funding available to provide, as the governor mentioned before, that we have 75% penetration pre-K program. We're providing a sufficient level of funding to get every 4-year-old pre-K assistance, pre-K programming by the 2028-2029 school year. So to address affordability, this budget continues along those efforts. The governor has been absolutely focused on making New York more affordable for our families, and that's happened through a variety of different interventions that we partnered with the legislature on over the last handful of years. We certainly have, we've enacted a child tax credit, what the governor mentioned on several occasions before. Governor's very first year, real property tax relief to 2 million homeowners. The governor has seen she's introduced and the legislature approved 2 middle-class tax cuts in our last 4 budgets, and increased and included the one that was included in last year's budget. So families are just seeing the fruits of those actions now. Families will start to really feel the changes we made in the child tax credit this year, thanks to the governor's leadership and the legislature's partnership. We tripled that benefit. As I mentioned earlier, we did provide homeowner tax relief as well in the governor's very first year. We provided an average $800 benefit in 2022, and it was a $2 billion package. So the governor, though, has not been satisfied with those. She's very proud of those accomplishments, I think it's fair to say, but she wants us to look forward, look further. She charged the entire team to come up with different ways of providing or promoting affordability. So this year we're going further, as I mentioned previously. We're enhancing and reforming the child tax credit, the independent care credit, different, provide an increased benefit for an additional 230,000 filers. And we're also taking steps to make sure that certain charitable contributions from taxpayers in the state of New York remain tax deductible. For institutions in the state of New York remain tax deductible. We are not subjecting tipped wages to state income tax. And those are sort of the big sort of tax side things, but from our view, and certainly the governor has prompted this, affordability doesn't always mean a tax cut or a rebate. It also means just putting forward some common sense solutions to knock down barriers that stifle business and development, or that just create new costs upon our state residents. So what we've done here is this executive budget takes a critical eye at the State Environmental Quality Review Act, what we call SEQR, and it proposes to exempt certain types of housing projects that have no significant impacts on the environment from additional SEQR review. But it also means paying attention to the needs of New Yorkers on a day-to-day basis. The governor is taking steps to tackle rising costs of home and auto insurance by putting forward several reforms to lower premium costs and reduce rates by targeting bad actors and limiting excessive payouts. Auto insurance premiums, no matter where you are in the state of New York, have really blossomed in the last 5 years, and it's time to intervene. The governor continues to provide for resources for our partners in local government. And the state has provided a tremendous amount of resources to them to protect the property tax cap, $75 billion in a cumulative benefit, but for the tax cap, which the governor has not modified since being governor. We've also maintained the freeze on local contributions to Medicaid, which we've seen this fiscal year and prior years is increasing by double digits percentage-wise, and foisting those costs back to municipal governments would be a real disaster for them. So the state is holding the line and assuming those costs. Those efforts resulted in relief of nearly $6.8 billion in cost avoidance for the city of New York and $3.1 billion for every other municipality in the state. One of the items in the budget that the governor alluded to before is a continued focus on law enforcement, prosecution, defense, violence interruption, subway policing, safety. All of those actions have a benefit that accrues to local governments, and we're proud to support that. The governor also knows that the governments are not out of the woods just yet, so that's why for the third consecutive year, we're augmenting the AIM run by an additional $50 million in temporary municipal assistance, making sure that municipal governments throughout the state of New York have the confidence in knowing that infusion of cash is on its way. And we're making sure that all corners of the state of New York are taken care of with investments from the tip of Long Island to the Adirondacks to my home county of Sullivan and everywhere in between. Some of those investments you've seen before, and I think you will see they have, except I might have stalled out here, forgive me. So some of the investments you've seen before, leading the pack, $100 billion in Micron, $1 billion here in Albany for New York creates for the wafer fab, chip fab, and then all sorts of other investments, ending with Empire AI, all of which have a statewide impact, and we're excited to continue to support those items. And certainly just last week, the governor having broken ground on Micron has provided such a lift and a lifeline for Central New York, and it's one we're so excited to see roll out over time. So moving on beyond that item, just kind of wrap up here, this year's budget, the governor mentioned that we have some coming into the home stretch here. One item that we talk a lot in the press, we see, well, how are different areas of the state faring? One area that the governor wanted to put a little extra concentration on was, what are we doing for our rural friends and neighbors? We have $100 million for factory-built starter homes, which are affordable and can be built in a fraction of the time. We have $50 million in grants for water infrastructure for rural communities specifically, a new $50 million. We provide $30 million for farmers that are negatively impacted by tariffs, providing an average of $3,000 for dairy producers and producers of specialty crops. $15 million to modernize our dairy farms, investing in the fairgrounds, and we don't want to, because we can't forget about our county fairs. The governor always looks forward to attending the state fair each and every year. So with that, I'll be in the Blue Room later on today at 3 o'clock to provide a more robust briefing, but I just want to assure you that this budget, this executive budget that the governor's charged us with composing, strikes a balance between being responsible while at the same time investing in the services that New Yorkers care so much about. So obviously I want to commend the governor for keeping the focus, and obviously giving us as much time as you did to help us put this all together, to the senior team as well for their help, and to the entire cabinet, the governor's cabinet, for contributing along the way. So thank you very much for your collective dedication and your fight for New Yorkers, and I appreciate the time. Cool.
Thank you very much, Blake. As we're concluding, I need to underscore something Blake just talked about. New York State is receiving over $17 billion in revenue over the next 2 years that exceeds our earlier projections. That's extraordinary, extraordinary. That's $17 billion from high-income earners, from record Wall Street bonuses, and from an economy that's booming again. That's money we can use to protect New Yorkers from federal dysfunction and to fund our bold agenda in the year ahead. And allows us to keep reserves strong, which is important for our ratings, which affects the cost of borrowing to fund our transformational projects, whether it's MTA or our housing projects. It also allows us to keep our spending strong now, serve New Yorkers, but also allows us to fund our priorities into the future. And that's why for the last 5 years I've focused on a pro-growth agenda that keeps New York competitive. That's how we fund a strong social safety net for New Yorkers who need it, so important to me, and expand programs that help families afford the essentials like childcare. Looking at this budget as a whole, you can see that it reflects discipline, momentum, and ambition, and a readiness for a more uncertain world. In my State of the State, I said we had built the boat to withstand the storm. We're not assuming calm seas ahead. We're steadying the course to navigate whatever comes next. We're making careful choices using our resources responsibly, because protecting your family and protecting your future is my fight, and this budget is how we get it done. Thank you.